Ladies and gentlemen, the lines are gone. I know. Let's get this show on the road. Just wanted to say once again, thank you all so much for the support the series has been receiving. Season 3 has taken the most work by far, with more complex, longer, and, well, more episodes than we've seen yet. It's going to be a good one. And without any further ado, let's begin. Season 3, Episode 1, Nosedive. It's an early, nice day in a suburban neighborhood. A woman is out on a jog. She keeps pulling out her phone and staring at it while she runs. A group of passerbys greet her and they both swipe their phones in each other's direction with a pleasant chime playing. She posts a photo and spends a few minutes while she's stretching, swiping through her feed, rating people 5 stars before even really looking at what they're posting. She's then in her bathroom looking into her mirror, practicing how to laugh. We get a close-up of her eyes showing a digital contact lens, so she laughs hysterically while a HUD pops up showing her name, Lacey, and a number, which reads 4.2. She walks out to her living room and tries to get the attention of her brother, who's playing a VR game. After throwing a pillow at him, she says that their landlord is sending over buyers to look at the house that day. They have about 4 weeks before their lease is up. She leaves and is now standing at the front of an outdoor coffee bar, everyone around staring at their phones and swiping. She gets her coffee, then the barista pulls out a cookie and offers it to her on the house. We can see that his number says 3.7. She replicates the fake giggle from before and takes the cookie, then the barista pops up on her phone. She rates him 5 stars, and he does the same. She affirms the people she walks past, reciprocally rating each other, and looks around to see a sea of numbers, averaging around 4.5 or so. She takes the cookie and bites it, very carefully and coordinated. She spits it out and sets the cookie next to her drink, posting it online. She sips the coffee and is disgusted by the taste, but her mood immediately changes when she hears the chime on her phone. A stream of 5-star reviews pour in and she happily looks around in excitement. She joins a woman on an elevator and they both tell each other how great it is to see them with that laid-back Valley Girl accent we all know and love. Lacey scrolls through the woman's feed trying to find something to say and then asks her about her cat. The woman says he's the best, and they giggle again, turning away from each other as their smiles fade away. The woman brings up Lacey's workplace and validates her being there, despite clearly having a distaste or looking down on anyone who works there. Lacey's interrupted from working by more people rating her 5 star after 5 star, until a woman named Naomi only rates her 4. Lacey is taken aback by this and clicks on her 4.8 star profile. She then leans around and puts a ragged stuffed animal into review. A man brings over a tray of smoothies and asks Lacey if she wants one. Chess here has only 3.4 and has a look of desperation on his face. She takes one of the smoothies and everyone around turns and gives her a look. She takes a sip, gives him a 5 star, boosting him up by a few thousandths of a point. He thanks her and walks away. A different man leans over and whispers to her that the office is not talking to Chess at the moment. She takes note of the low rating and asks him what happened. He says that Chess went through a breakup with someone at the office and no one is on Chess's side, pointing out why he is kissing ass and bringing smoothies around. He also mentions that if he gets below 2.5, then he will be fired. Then he swipes a low ranking in his direction. Lacey gets some chimes on her phone and is suddenly being downvoted by anonymous accounts, her rating dropping in real time. Later on, she's being shown a potential option for a new home, which she really likes. As she is being read out the details of the contract, she is shown the price. We can tell that she definitely can't afford that much. The woman tells her that if Lacey reaches a 4.5 rating, then she can get a 20% discount. Back at home, her brother makes fun of the place she's trying to get into and points out there's no way that she would qualify for it. We can also see that he's at a 3.7. She goes to a meeting at a reputation center with someone who specializes in strategies to boost one's rating. He tells her that without some kind of a major boost from high-rated people, there's no way she will reach 4.5 in time. She swipes through Naomi's page, 5-starring every single post. She's greeting strangers even more than she was doing before and compliments them. Suddenly, she runs into Chess. He says the door won't open since he's now down to 2.4. Lacey ignores him and walks past and bumps into the same woman in the elevator. Lacey offers her a croissant, which she denies. And once she steps out of the elevator, she's only rated 3 stars. She's now on a call with the man from the Reputation Center, and he tells her not to try too hard, as especially high-starred people can smell it from a mile away. He tells her that authentic gestures are the best received. She takes out the doll and posts a picture of it. Almost immediately, she's notified that Naomi has rated it 5 stars. Back at home, Lacey is learning how to make some fancy food for appearance. She accidentally spills some oil on her shirt and quickly washes it out with some water. She gets a call from Naomi and frantically goes to put something over the water stain on her chest, while her brother reveals that she and Naomi knew each other from way back when. The two of them fake kissing each other, and Naomi says that when she saw Lacey's post about the doll, it reminded her of the old days, and now wants her to be her maid of honor, revealing she's engaged. She asks Lacey to do a speech in front of hundreds of high-rated people. Lacey, seeing the opportunity, hastily accepts, and the two of them scream and giggle as the call ends. Her brother, having overheard everything, confronts Lacey about her contradictory behavior. He says Naomi was always mean to her and reminds her how she banged Lacey's old boyfriend. Lacey excitedly also calls the realtor and takes the place, sending her a deposit despite yet not qualifying for the discount. She then recites her speech to her brother, talking about how, in this crazy world, everyone's all caught up in their own head. She's even tearing up at the end. Her brother calls her a sociopath, and she gets a call saying her car is here and ready. He antagonizes her some more, telling her she will never be content with her status. She argues with him, and then gets a negative chime on her phone telling her that her car has been canceled. Blaming her brother for the ding to her status, she books another car and packs up to leave, yelling at and scolding him for having a low rating. As she's leaving, she bumps into a woman walking home, spilling her drink. She scoffs at Lacey and dings her. We can see she's a 4.8. Her cab driver, annoyed since Lacey was being obnoxious with Naomi on the phone the whole ride, dings her 1 star as well. Lacey enters the airport and she receives some bad news. Her flight has been canceled. The only seat left requires that a person be a 4.2 or above, but due to her most recent encounters, she just falls short at 4.18. Lacey gets frustrated with the woman and cusses at her. She immediately calls security. The officer comes over and docks her 1 full point as a temporary measure, as well as activating double damage for the period of 24 hours. All negative ratings will be twice as penalizing. Lacey walks away and the people standing behind her in line ding her 1 star. She goes to get a rental car, and due to her low status right now, the only one available to her is some really old model on their super saver fleet. As she drives, she practices her speech some more, gets another call from Naomi. She's pissed that Lacey won't make it to the rehearsal dinner, and asks if she should get a replacement for maid of honor. Lacey insists that she will make it to the wedding. The car then runs low on battery, so she pulls off in order to charge it. After realizing the charge port won't fit her car, she goes up to the stand to ask if there's an adapter that she can use. The guy says no and then dings her for no reason. She asks the people around if anyone has one. They all say no. She ditches her car and walks along the road to try and hitchhike. People drive past and ding her as they go. Eventually a truck pulls up and stops. A woman leans out and offers her a ride. Lacey sees that the woman is 1.4 and somehow, still on her pedestal, denies her. The woman insists. Lacey looks around and realizes this is her only choice. Susan here offers her some bevs, coffee in a blue thermos, and whiskey in the red one. Lacey attempts to check her feed for any kind of danger signs. Susan calls her out, and, she seems very chill and down to earth. Lacey explains how she's going to turn her rating around, and after the wedding, everything will be alright. She then asks Susan if she wants to hear her speech. Susan looks at her, and then firmly says no. Lacey's taken aback by this. Who knows how long it's been since the last time someone responded with something other than masked affirmations. Susan asks why Lacey's rating is so low, and Lacey says it's because she yelled at the workers at the airport and offended the people around her. Susan asks how it felt. She says awful. Then Susan clarifies, saying she meant the yelling. Lacey's a bit confused and then falls back to hoping that if she gets to the wedding, everything will work out, explaining her whole plan again. Susan shakes her head and tells Lacey about how she used to be a 4.6 back in the day. She tells a story about her husband getting cancer and her attempts to find him the highest rated doctors, nurses, and treatment. She says the cancer didn't give a shit about the ratings and kept growing. They learned about an experimental treatment which was very expensive and very exclusive. With 1 bed available at the center, her husband, a 4.3, had to give it up for a 4.4. She tells Lacey about how good it felt to finally shed the weight of the pressure to conform around her after her husband died, and offers Lacey to try it. Lacey scoffs and denies this, making the excuse that, at her time, Susan had something with her life, and that she hasn't gotten the chance to earn that yet. Susan asks her what that is, and Lacey scrambles a bit to find an answer, but settles on the idea that she could take a look at herself someday and be content. She expounds on how far away that future is and expresses her understanding that playing the game is just how the world works now. Lacey falls asleep in the truck, and by sunrise, Susan wakes her up to let her out, having taken her the furthest she can. She reassures her that the buses in town should be able to get her where she needs to go, and says she left Lacey a little emergency escape hatch in her suitcase. With Susan driving off, Lacey opens the suitcase and finds the red thermos of whiskey. She's now in a bathroom, and some cosplayers are talking about a convention that they are going to. Turns out, it's in the same city as Naomi's wedding. She quickly researches what she can about the show, and then comes out of the bathroom and starts to BS with them. They then offer her a ride on their bus. Lacey does not do a very good job of fitting in, and gets another call from Naomi. Naomi tells her not to come to the wedding, disgusted by how low Lacey's rating is. She then reveals that she just wanted her because a vintage, genuine Bond with a low 4 worked great in all the simulations that they ran. Lacey then asks, hold on, is that Jack Reacher? Alright. Anyways, Lacey then asks if it was all just about the numbers for her. And Naomi smartly retorts that it was just about numbers for the both of them. Lacey says she's going to show up anyway and that she's doing her speech. Naomi yells at her to go home and hangs up. Everyone on the bus is staring at Lacey, and they throw her out once they realize that she's never even heard of the show before. Lacey opens the suitcase and downs the whole thermos of whiskey. She looks over the edge of the road and spots someone on a dirt bike. She heads down and asks to borrow it. Now, I don't know who in their right mind would just let some random stranger borrow a dirt bike, but they do, and she drives the dirt bike, weaving in and out of the other cars on the road, and we cut to the wedding. Naomi has a big smile on her face while the vows are being read out. The two of them are pronounced husband and wife, and they kiss. God damn, Reacher. What the fuck? Alright, get it. Lacey pulls up to the gated community where the wedding is taking place, seeing a bunch of guards out front. With a minimum rating of 3.8 to enter, there's no way she'll be able to get in. She drives the bike along the hillside around and falls into the mud. Reacher begins a little speech, and Lacey sneaks around through the bushes. She eventually makes it into the wedding, grabs the microphone, and asks everyone to quiet down. Her clothes are a mess, her makeup is running, and she's covered in mud. Naomi tells Reacher to get rid of her, but Reacher says it wouldn't play too well to do that. Lacey starts her speech talking about her old relationship with Naomi, intermittently letting her frustration show through. Reacher gets up to stop her, and Lacey continues talking, strafing around to avoid him. She begins to cry as she says how much she always looked up to Naomi until she abandoned her for a new job, new friends, and new status. This whole time, everyone around is dinging her. Her rating drops lower and lower. Reacher and his best man try to rush her, but she grabs a knife and points it at them. She freaks out and then hilariously threatens to cut the head off of her doll. Two security agents then bust through the door, and she quickly tries to rush through the end of her speech, finally realizing and stating how much she hates this new Naomi. Someone trips Lacey, and she drops with the microphone to the ground. She's quickly apprehended and continues to speak, comparing the doll to how she felt about Naomi back then. Lacey is then taken to a jail, where she steps up to a machine that's about eye level. She sticks her head in, and it strips her of her digital contacts. Once she's put into her concrete chamber, she takes off her dress and gazes into the light, tearing up at the dust particles she never would have noticed before. She giggles and spots a man in an adjacent cell. She then stares at him and makes a mocking gesture of swiping a ding in his direction. He chuckles, and the two of them suddenly begin to happily insult each other, not liking his mustache, not liking her voice or her aura, etc. They go back and forth, exaggerating insults more and more. They stare at each other, and the episode ends with the two of them simultaneously exclaiming a proud, "Fuck you!" This is such a strong start to the new season. It's one of the ones that already feels close to home. I like how the rating system is anchored so that the high-ranking people have much more sway on people lower than them. There's also lots of symbolism that I noticed. Firstly, when she's in the jail cell, she's still wearing this tight dress and corset, which she takes off. It was yet another thing for appearances binding her. Also another cool thing, during the sequence when she's kicked off the bus, the chime of the downvote is incorporated into the music. It kind of comes off a little bit cheesy, but I still like the detail. I really don't have anything to say negative about this episode. I almost wish I did, but it's just so solid. It's so emblematic of what we already experience today in our own minds with social media and status. Concept, 5 out of 5. Execution, 5 out of 5. Ending, 5 out of 5. Giving a grand total, 15 points. Season 3, Episode 2, Playtest. Cooper here is packing up a big backpack. He grabs his phone, his keys, and his passport. He walks very quietly down the stairs past a photo of him and his parents. There's a car waiting for him outside that drives him to the airport. On the way, he gets a call from his mom, and he declines it. He's then flying on a plane, playing some garbage mobile game. The stewardess comes over and asks him to put his phone away. He notices that the girl next to him is scared and very nervous. So he leans over and tells her that it's just like riding a roller coaster. He then sticks his hands up in the air and pretends that they're on a ride. She giggles and joins him. We get a montage of Cooper in many different countries around the world. Australia, India, Italy, and ending in Britain. He's in a cafe, swiping on a dating app, and matches with a girl named Sonia. At a bar, she introduces herself as a tech analyst for a news website. Cooper mentions he's looking for fun things to do before the end of his trip, and she invites him back to her place. The next morning, they're laying in bed, and a phone starts to buzz. Sonia picks up the phone and hands it to Cooper, mocking his Americanism for it saying Mom. He denies the call again, and she takes note of how impersonal it seemed. Sonia then makes him the most unappealing breakfast I've ever seen in my entire life. A single piece of bread with Marmite on it. Before he takes a bite, he gets another call from his mom. He denies it yet again, and then Sonia starts to rationalize from his mom's perspective, how she must be worried about him vanishing out of nowhere. Cooper explains how he just needed to get away from the family house for a while, and how he was taking care of his dad, who died a few months ago from early onset Alzheimer's, telling her how it felt to have his dad stand right in front of him and have no idea who he was. He expresses that he doesn't want to deal with his mom over the phone and will take care of everything when he gets back from the trip. Sonia tells him he's a good guy and to call his mom. At an ATM, Cooper goes to withdraw some money. It declines him multiple times, saying there wasn't enough balance in his account. Seems as if his card got hacked while he was traveling, and it drained all the money. He scrolls down his contact list, contemplating calling his mom for some help. He goes to dial her, and then changes his mind. He heads back to Sonia's place, and with nothing left to buy a plane ticket home, he turns to an app called Odd Jobs, a place to earn a bit of cash doing, well, odd jobs. Sonia takes the phone and scrolls through it and finds a post saying Thrill Seekers Wanted. A huge horror game company called Saito Gameu is running a playtest for some cutting-edge new software. This would also be a great opportunity for Sonia to get an exclusive story, if Cooper can sneak a picture of something that's going on in there. Cooper's picked up in a car and taken to their studios, which is inside this huge, gothic, almost castle. He's greeted by a woman named Katie. She takes him through the office to the testing room. Meanwhile, Cooper is peeking around at all the devs hard at work. They get to the room, and Katie tells him she needs to take his phone. He reluctantly gives it to her, and then she powers it off. Inside the testing room, Katie asks him to sign an NDA. He flips through it, and she mentions that the playtest will necessitate a small medical procedure, but nothing permanent. He flips to the end and finds that there's no signature page. Katie apologizes for the error and leaves the room to fetch a new one. Cooper quickly grabs his phone, powers it back on, and sends a photo of what's inside a case on the desk. A strange metal headband and discs with symbols. He hears the door open back up and quickly gets back into his seat, ready to sign the waiver. Katie gets him prepped, explaining how he's going to experience a form of augmented reality. Attaching the metal headband to his headrest, it clicks into place and powers up. She then takes out a little black device and places it into this handheld machine. She brings the machine near his head, and it begins to extend out, sticking the little mushroom into the back of his neck. He pokes around at it, and Katie places the symbol discs on the table, spread out in front of him. She takes note of the time and initializes the device. The progress bar is about halfway done, and suddenly the table begins to buzz. Turns out Cooper didn't get a chance to shut his phone back down, and Mom is calling again. Katie quickly grabs it and shuts the phone down, looking at Cooper with mild suspicion. Once it completes, she removes the headband from the chair. She tells him to watch the targets, and the discs then extrude down into the table. A transparent, pixelated gopher pops out of one of the holes. Katie asks him what he sees, and then hits a few buttons on her laptop. The gopher suddenly becomes much more high-res and opaque. He reaches his hand out to touch it, and his fingers start to glitch and phase through it. Katie explains how it's a sort of mental projection. She can't see anything that he can, and nothing's really there. The gopher pops into one of the holes, and Cooper then excitedly plays a game of whack-a-mole. Eventually, the gopher surrenders and pops back into the hole, and the table resets back to normal. Katie asks him a few questions about his experience, and then offers him to test out a much more in-development beta project with much more money on the table as well. She takes him to meet the CEO, Shao Saito. Cooper congratulates him on how fun the mole game was, and Katie translates when needed. Shao explains how he likes to make the player feel on edge, and the reason you get the adrenaline rush is because afterwards you are still alive, having faced your fears in a safe environment. He describes the beta project as the most personal survival horror game in history, one that works out how to scare you by using your own mind. Katie puts the headband over him again and connects a wire to the device in the back of his head. She talks about how the game will monitor his brain activity and work out best how to frighten him. He excitedly agrees, and they initialize the program. Katie then takes him out to a manor, noting how it was the one that was modeled and texture scanned for their games. She tells him all that he has to do for the test is stay here in the manor, and she gives him an earpiece so they can stay in contact the whole time. She reassures him that the experience is purely audio-visual. Nothing can hurt him or even touch him, and says that if it gets too intense, they can pull him out at any time. She takes her leave, and Cooper walks around inspecting the house and all the things that are inside. He opens up a cabinet, and Katie chimes in through the earpiece, testing if he can hear her. She also tells him that the wine in the cabinet is non-alcoholic since they need him with a clear head. He pours himself a glass and walks up to a grim painting of the manor. He lights up the fireplace and takes a seat on a comfy chair, pulling out a book to read as there's nothing else to do. A large spider then crawls across the carpet, and Katie chimes in again, pointing out how his heart rate has suddenly increased. The spider crawls up to the side of the chair and jump scares him, with Katie pointing out how the game has worked out that he's an arachnophobe already. Cooper stomps around for a bit and eventually squashes the digital spider, pointing out how realistic it was. He sits down to read the book again, and the lamp next to him begins to flicker. Cooper looks up, and we can see that the painting now has a lit window in it. He turns away, gesturing to Katie to look at what he's seeing, and when he turns back to the painting, there's now the silhouette of a man in the light. He suddenly hears loud footsteps and creaking on the floor above him, and he peers around to investigate. When he gets around the corner, he's met face to face with a man in a black suit. The man doesn't move, or talk, or even blink, and Cooper congratulates Katie with how scared he got. He takes a closer look and realizes that the face of the man is of a guy that used to bully him back in high school. The system seemingly looking for trauma to cling to. Cooper spends some time talking with Katie, nervously looking around. He heads back to the kitchen and grabs a jar full of cookies. When he closes the cabinet, he sees the shadow of the man in the suit, who turns to face his direction. A giant, hairy spider then swings around the corner, screeching at him. It comes to a stop, and after regaining his composure, Cooper tries to describe what he's looking at. It's the face of the bully, mashed into the head of the spider. Katie's voice starts to distort, and then goes radio silent. Someone bangs loudly on the door outside, and Cooper worriedly goes to open it, hoping it's Katie and the crew. He opens the door, and it's Sonia. She says he's in danger. Cooper is impressed by the device's ability to conjure her up in such a realistic manner. He goes to phase his hand through her face, but she's really there. She says that she looked into some patents based off of the photo that he sent her, and that the CEO had filed for a computer-brain interface, which got rejected for how insane and dangerous it was. Cooper continues to try and rationalize her being here, now thinking that they must have paid her to show up and mess with him. She tells him 5 people have disappeared in the last year, all having signed up to the Odd Jobs app. Cooper asks if her story is true, then how did she find him? She says that she just looked up the address for the studio, but he points out how that's not specific enough to how she found him inside the manor. She then claims that she tracked him using a Find My Friends app. He catches her again since they took his phone, and it's most likely shut off. Cooper mocks her then for a bit for her obvious fabrications. She pouts and then bumps into his shoulder. She then rifles through a drawer of some kitchen utensils and asks him if he wonders how his bank account got hacked, pulling out a knife. After telling him that she cloned his card, she advances towards him. He backs away and tells her multiple times to put the knife away, and she antagonizes him for not ever calling his mom, stepping over some shards of broken glass. She grinds the knife on the kitchen table, and Cooper says that he's done with the test. He turns around and then the man spider lunges at him. Sonia then stabs the knife into his back, poking all the way through his shoulder. He screams as she tries to grapple him and throws her into his shelf, glass shattering all around. She gets up onto the table and then tackles him down to the floor. He struggles to get her off, eventually reaching for a piece of broken bottle, and after seeing his attempted escape, she lifts him up and then slams him back down onto the ground, with the knife piercing even further than before. He grabs onto the back of her head and yanks on her hair, and her head suddenly starts twisting and morphing around like a 2010s Corridor Digital video. Her skin peels off, roaring and screeching at him. With all his strength, he grabs onto her head and plunges it down into the knife, crying and exasperating. After a moment, he looks up to see that none of it was real, and Katie's voice finally begins to resurface. He yells at her, saying he was told that he wouldn't feel anything, and she insists that that's not possible, unless the neural net had figured out a way to replicate physical sensations. Cooper firmly tells her to stop the game and that he wants out. She says she needs a bit of time to figure this out, and he tries to rip the device out of the back of his head. She warns him not to remove it himself and that it could kill him. To go forward with deactivating the test, she tells him that they need him to make it to an access point. He walks up to the top floor of the house and walks towards a door. He knows damn well that there's something ready to FNAF jump scare him on the other side, thinking it's going to be his own mother or something. And when he opens the door, nothing happens. He then enters into the room and Katie begins to laugh, telling him the purpose of this was to see if he could be broken enough to obey instructions without any question, which they have. He turns around to leave, and the door has suddenly vanished. He bangs on the wall, and Katie asks him if he can describe his mother's face, or her hair color, or any detail about her physical appearance. She asks him more personal questions, what his favorite band is, his favorite ice cream, the name of the girl who stabbed him. He starts to panic and whimper, not knowing the answer to any of these questions. She tells him to look in the mirror behind him, and he can't even recognize himself. And Katie tells him that soon he won't be anything, just like his dad. He tells her to shut up over and over, again and again, ripping the earpiece out. Her voice then continues to echo around him, telling him he's abandoned his mother and should have called her. Cooper grips his skull and repeatedly screams, "Get out of my head." He punches the mirror and then grabs one of the shards, attempting to sever the device off of his neck. Suddenly the door opens, and two men restrain him, with Katie following closely behind. He repeats again and again, "Get out of my head." She connects to the device, and Xiao enters the room as well. Katie then says that she can't stop it. The data has dug in deeper than it's supposed to. Cooper weakly says that he doesn't know who he is and he needs to go home, almost like a child learning how to talk for the first time. He's barely able to breathe. Xiao tells him that on behalf of the company, he humbly apologizes. He looks to one of the men and tells him to put Cooper with the others. Cooper's then dragged out of the room screaming no and stop. The room then begins to glitch out and we get a reveal that he'd never even left for the manor. He's still in the room where he'd met Xiao. Katie removes the device from his neck and says that the whole experience took place in a matter of 1 second. Cooper flies home and he's repelled by playing that mobile game from before. He enters into his house and goes into his mom's room. She's on the bed, crying. She turns around and walks up to him and says that she needs to call her son, picking up the phone. She asks him if he knows why Cooper had left, and he says that he's right here, but she doesn't recognize him. She repeats that she has to call him and make sure that he's safe. She dials the number with a look of panic on Cooper's face, and we cut to the phone ringing on the table. Double reveal, he'd never even left the first room. The headband is going haywire. He calls out to his mom over and over, almost on the verge of a seizure. Katie disconnects the headband and he twitches, his nose and his ears bleeding. He's on the ground and Katie and Xiao discuss how the phone must have caused a signal interference and that he must have switched it back on when she was out of the room. Katie says that every synapse in his brain lit up all at once and then went dead. His body is zipped up in a bag and Katie makes the final notes for the test, indicating that it took a matter of 0.04 seconds and noting in the observations that he, quote, called mom. Now, I think this was one of the ones that really, truly got me the first time that I watched it. I imagine for some people the double bait and switch could be seen from a mile away, but I think they did such a good job with it. The whole sequence inside the manor plays out exactly like how a dream does, the mind rationalizing and filling in every gap that it doesn't understand. You know, like, of course Sonia was the one who set it up and hacked his card. She's a tech analyst, and that's what they do according to his navigating mind. They did such an outstanding job telling the story, and Cooper is such a likable guy and met such a terrible fate. There's other cool details, like the man in the suit in the manor could be seen as a bit of concept art that he saw when he was walking by all the devs. That being said, I think the concept is a bit on the niche side to warrant 5 points in that department. Concept, we're going to go 4 out of 5. Execution, 5 out of 5. Ending, 5 out of 5. Giving it a total of 14 points. Season 3, Episode 3. Shut Up and Dance. The car pulls into a parking garage. A woman steps out and nervously looks around. She gets a chime on her phone and places the keys on the rear tire. After sending and receiving another message, she walks away from the car. Our main guy for this episode is Kenny, who's cleaning off a table at a restaurant when he spots that a little girl had left a toy by accident. He bends down to give it to her with a big smile on his face. He gets home from work and finds that his laptop is missing. His sister had taken it into her room and is now trying to pirate some movies to watch. He scolds her and then takes it back to his room and reboots it. When he comes back online, we can see that it's completely infected with malware. He downloads the software to remove it and goes to get a code from his fridge. We then see someone is watching him from his webcam, either from the initial virus or maybe the cleaner was a Trojan. The next day, he puts a lock on his door to stop his sister from stealing his stuff and heads downstairs. His mom is getting ready to go out on a date. He and his sister are watching TV when some suggestive music videos start to play. Kenny goes upstairs to, let's just say, relieve himself. After he does the deed, he gets an anonymous email saying in big, bold letters, "We saw what you did." Attached to the email is footage from his webcam, with him unbuckling his belt. Kenny slams the laptop shut and begins to panic. He locks his door and opens the laptop again, putting a bit of putty over the webcam. He gets another email saying to reply with his phone number, or they will post the video to everyone that he knows. Kenny goes to reply and types in some random numbers, hesitates for a moment, and then types in his actual number. He immediately gets a chime on his phone with a message telling him to keep his phone on, and that when the time comes, he will be activated. Kenny asks who they are and if they want money, and they just respond with, "Tell no one, we are watching." He nervously looks around his room for any sign of hidden cameras, and then sits down on his bed, trying to breathe on the verge of tears. The next morning he arrives at work and is suddenly told that he's been activated. They tell him to go to a location about an hour away. He tells them that he's at work, and they say to be there in 45 minutes, or they leak the video. He tells his manager that he's feeling sick and hurriedly bikes away as fast as he can. He makes it to the top of the building just in time, and a guy drives up in a moped. He pulls out a white box with some numbers on it. He takes a photo of Kenny and tells him that if he does what he's told, he will be let free. The hackers tell Kenny to type in the numbers that are on the box and to bring the package to a hotel room. He ditches his bike and takes the bus and opens the box to see what's inside. It's a cake with hearts and the words, "I love you," printed on it. He walks up to the hotel room door, knocks on it, but the man inside denies the delivery, saying he hasn't ordered anything. Kenny then tells the hackers that he won't accept it, and they say to tell the man that the package is from Mindy. The man then opens the door and pulls him inside, and he interrogates Kenny about who he is and how he knows about Mindy. Kenny tries to tell him about the people who hacked him, and the man suddenly receives a series of chimes on his phone, his expression dropping. He vomits and then drinks as much as he can out of the hotel minibar, and he tells Kenny that the two of them need to get to the car from the parking garage, and they head out. The man grabs the keys off of the tire and then tells Kenny that he should drive since he had all those drinks in the hotel. Kenny says that he can drive, but doesn't even have his permit yet. The man then takes the wheel and tells Kenny to navigate. He asks Kenny what they've got on him, and when he doesn't respond, the man tells him that he was trying to get a hooker. He'd messaged back and forth with who he thought was a girl named Mindy and exchanged photos with them. He says that if his family caught wind of this, there's no doubt his wife would leave him and win the custody of his kids, adamantly saying that he's not losing them. Kenny embarrassingly tells him that all he did was whack off to some pictures online. The man scoffs at him and says that's fine, everyone does that. He then realizes that the car is almost out of gas, and they pull into a station to fill it up. He gives Kenny his card to go pay, and when he comes back outside, the man is talking to a woman who works at his kid's school. She's making some small talk, and the man makes the excuse that Kenny is his nephew, and mentions that they have to get going to the train station. The woman then asks if they could give her a ride, as it's on the way. They try and tell her that they're in a rush, but she insists that it won't be any bother. Now heading the wrong way, both the man and Kenny receive messages to turn around. Their GPS is being actively tracked. The man drives like a maniac to get the woman where she needs, and then speeds off. They make it to the front of a bank, and new messages come in telling them to look in the cake. The man reaches in and pulls out a bag containing a hat, sunglasses, and a handgun. They receive another message asking who is driver and who is robber. The man quickly picks driver and tries to calm Kenny's panicked worries by telling him that the workers are trained to just hand over the cash. When that doesn't work, he begins to tell Kenny about how embarrassed he'd be if the video they have on Kenny got leaked. All the people at school, work, and family would never see him normal again. Kenny hyperventilates and repeatedly says that this is not real, and the man tells him he can do this. He finally takes all the gear and jumps out of the car. He walks up to the teller, pulls the gun out, and literally starts to piss himself while he tells her to hand over the money. She stuffs the bag full of cash, and Kenny awkwardly exits the bank. When he steps outside, he sees that the car is gone. Suddenly, the man pulls around the corner, and Kenny hops in. The two of them drive off. They head down the road and get to a one-way construction stoplight. We can hear sirens wailing in the background. After a long wait, the light turns green, and they start to continue. Just as they're about to pass the truck, a police car pulls in front of them, then dodges them and speeds away. They make it to a rural clearing, and the messages tell them that they need to part ways now, with Kenny needing to take the money to a drop point, and the man needing to destroy the car. Kenny steps out of the car, and the man apologizes for what he'd said to him earlier. They shake hands, and Kenny shuts the door and begins to walk to the drop point. After walking through the trees for a while, he makes it to a small open patch. A man in a gray jacket is standing there with a large box. The man pulls out a drone and sets it on the ground, saying that they told him he needed to activate it first. He then asks Kenny if he's got the prize money for the fight. Kenny looks at him confused, and the man says that the two of them need to fight to the death, or they will both have everything leaked. The drone circles around them as the man takes his jacket off. He starts to tell Kenny about how his life will be over if his stuff gets out. Kenny says that all he did was look at some pictures online, and the man creepily says that's all he did as well, and then asks Kenny how young they were.
The two of them get a chime on their phone, messages telling them to fight now, and Kenny pulls out the gun and points it in the man's direction.
He then pleads for a moment, and Kenny locks the hammer back and puts the gun to his chin. He screams and pulls the trigger with a deafening, empty click. Seeing as Kenny has nothing but a fake gun, the man lunges towards him and tackles him to the ground. The drone watches as we hear punches and grunting. The man from the hotel then steps out of a taxi and walks into his home. He takes his shoes off, heads upstairs, and takes a grateful look at his daughter while she sleeps. He gets a message on his phone. It's nothing but a picture of a troll face. He walks into his bedroom and sees his wife crying, who distraughtly asks him who Mindy is. The woman from the beginning of the episode gets a troll face message as well, with her secrets exposed. Kenny stumbles down the hill, his face bloodied, and gets a call from his mom.
When he answers, she scolds him, saying that the video got leaked and that he was looking at pictures of kids. His mom cries and pleads that it's not true.
And we hear the chime of one final text. He's been trolled. Kenny tries to slowly walk away as several police cars pull up in front of him, and right as they grab him, we cut to credits.
Now, the real ones know that this is a re-upload. My first analysis was completely ass backwards, and I wanted to give context to that with full transparency first. Initially, I genuinely thought that Kenny was just a normal teenager who would have been so embarrassed by the video being leaked that it would lead him into entering the game, and that the hackers had lied about the reveal at the end. I thought that they were just people who wanted to watch the world burn, so to speak, and were just looking for any chance that they could to cause ruin in people's lives. A commenter on the first upload pointed out how the hackers could be more so seen as a vigilante syndicate of sorts, people taking things into their own hands to punish people for the crimes they so rightly deserve. Everything makes so much more sense with that new lens, and previous scenes take on a much different meaning, like at the beginning, when he hands the toy to the little girl. I made the decision to redo this segment because, partially, I wasn't happy with how the rest of the video got overshadowed by my mistake, and also, frankly, it just didn't do this episode justice. Overall, this is yet another perfect example of the essence of this show. Great concept, great acting, and a twist that toys with your sympathy towards a monster. Concept, 5 out of 5. Execution, 5 out of 5. Ending, 5 out of 5. Giving Shut Up and Dance a total of 15 points.
Season 3, Episode 4, San Junipero. A nerdy girl walks along the streets of a city. Seems to take place in 1987. She sees a snazzily dressed woman walk into a club with a man following behind. They mention how they've only got a few hours left to use. She's clearly trying to get rid of him. The nerdy girl walks into the club. People are dancing, drinking, having a good time. She does exactly what I would do in this scenario and heads straight for the arcade machines. A nerdy guy nervously approaches her as she's playing a game of Bubble Bobble, trying to hint that he wants to join her. She kind of ignores him, and then he asks her to play a game of Top Speed. She looks at the screen and sees a demo controlling a car, speeding around, and it crashes into a house, flipping over. She has a somewhat visceral reaction to this and jumps back, telling him no and that she needs to get her bearings. Sitting at a booth now, the snazzy woman from before sits next to her and tells her to follow along with whatever she says. The man from before comes over and the woman pushes him away, saying she needs to spend some time with her friend who only has 6 months left to live. The nerdy girl fictitiously corrects her, saying only 5 months. He finally leaves and the snazzy woman introduces herself as Kelly, with the nerdy girl shaking her hand and saying her name is Yorkie. Yes, like the dog breed. Yorkie asks who the guy was and Kelly says that he's some guy that she met at the Quagmire. Giggity. Yorkie inquires what this is, and Kelly shuts her down, saying she doesn't want to know. She takes Yorkie over to the bar, gets him a couple drinks, and then stares at her for a moment, asking why she wears glasses. Yorkie nervously replies that she doesn't really need to, but she used to in school, so it's kind of a comfort thing now. Kelly calls out how she's dressed like young Sheldon. Well, I mean, she doesn't say that specifically, but come on now. And pulls Yorkie out onto the dance floor. Yorkie stands there and awkwardly tries to copy Kelly's moves as she dances away. The music suddenly starts to fade and slow down. She looks around and everyone is staring at her. She runs outside to calm down, with Kelly soon following after. Yorkie tells her she's not much of a dancer and felt like everyone was staring because it was two girls dancing together. She also mentioned that her parents are pretty uptight and that they wouldn't approve of her enjoying herself in any capacity. Kelly asks her if there's anything she's never gotten the chance to do before. Yorkie replies so many things, and Kelly invites her to go to bed with her, saying midnight is only 2 hours away. Yorkie gets nervous and denies her, mentioning how she has a fiancé named Greg elsewhere. Kelly offers one more time, but Yorkie says it was nice to meet her, shakes her hand, and begins to walk away. She stops for a moment and turns around, but Kelly is already gone. We then see a title card saying 1 week later, and Yorkie is at home trying different outfits to find her style. She finally settles on her old look with the glasses and heads back into the club. The man confronts Kelly again, trying to get with her. She says that they had their time, but he needs to move on. Inside the club, Yorkie spots Jerry Seinfeld over her, flirting with Kelly. Kelly looks over at her, and then asks Jerry to dance, eyeing Yorkie the whole time as they do. They meet up in the bathroom, and Yorkie tries to initiate, but tells her that she doesn't know how and asks Kelly to take the reins. They then drive off in Kelly's Jeep, and Yorkie asks her how long she's been in San Junipero. She replies a couple of months, and the plan is long enough to enjoy herself. Car suddenly honks and nearly hits them. Kelly swerves off the road, and then they stop. They look at each other, and then they laugh. They eventually get back to Kelly's place and spend the night there. Yorkie asks her when she realized that she liked girls, and she says that she's always had little crushes on women around her, but ultimately she loved her husband, who she says she was married to for a very long time. She says that he chose not to stick around and that she's set to pass through pretty soon, wanting to just have a good time with what she's got left here. The clock strikes midnight, and we cut to another week later. Yorkie's back at the club. She can't find Kelly anywhere. She goes up to the bartender and asks if he's seen her, and he tells her to try the Quagmire. Giggity. He points the direction to her, and she heads inside this complex that looks straight out of Cyberpunk 2077. People pack the smoke-ridden halls as she tries to make her way through. She bumps into the man from before, and he tells her that she's probably just another one of Kelly's temporary bits of fun. He then mentions to try a different time, and that he's seen her in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s. This place called San Junipero is clearly some kind of a Second Life type simulation, or even a parallel universe of some kind. And the implications tell us it's also a sort of virtual afterlife. She spends week after week trying to find Kelly, eventually landing in 2002, where she finally sees her playing Dance Dance Revolution with the nerdy guy from the arcade. Yorkie tells her that she's upset she's been hiding from her. Kelly responds that this whole thing is supposed to be fun, and that the relationship she's having thrust upon her is not fun. Yorkie tells her that she should feel bad about this, and then leaves. After pondering for a moment, Kelly punches the mirror in frustration. She looks down at her hand, there's no blood or anything, and when she looks back up, the mirror is no longer shattered. She runs outside and spots Yorkie sitting on the rooftop. They talk about feelings or whatever for a moment, and then Yorkie kisses her. Kelly asks Yorkie, now back at her place, if she plans on going through with getting married to Greg. Yorkie says that she has to, also mentioning that her family doesn't approve. Yorkie brings up how Kelly mentioned she doesn't have much time left and asks what she meant by that. Kelly responds with, "They tell me 3 months," and then says that they told her the same thing 6 months ago, so she's unsure of how long she actually has, implying cancer. Yorkie asks if she will stay here after. Kelly says no. Her husband had the opportunity to stay here in San Junipero after his death, but it wasn't something he believes in and allowed himself to die. Yorkie is appalled at how someone could reject a possibility like this, exclaiming how outside of here she never would have met someone like Kelly. Kelly asks what she means by that, but Yorkie is very withholding and continues to say that Kelly wouldn't like her if they'd met. Kelly then asks where she really lives, and after realizing that they don't live that far apart from each other in the real world, she says she wants to come visit. With the clock striking midnight yet again, we cut to an assisted living home. An old woman, who I presume is Kelly, for no particular reason, is walked out to a car and heads out with her assistant. They make it to a hospital, and a doctor takes them into a room. He explains Yorkie won't be able to respond physically in any way, but that she can hear them. He closes the door, and we see Yorkie lying in the hospital bed, with a breathing tube in her neck. Kelly walks up, kisses her on the forehead, and shares a nice moment with Yorkie. A nurse spots them as they go to leave the hospital, and introduces himself as Greg. He says it was so nice of them to see her in real life before she passes over, and Kelly's confused because this is something that Yorkie had never mentioned. Greg sits her down and gets them some coffee, and explains Yorkie had just been doing the trial run. He fills Kelly in on what happened and how long it's been since she ended up quadriplegic. He says that when she was 21, she came out to her folks, and being very religious, they tell her they don't want a gay daughter, and after getting into an argument, she drives off in her car, and ends up running off the road and crashing. She's been in this state for over 40 years now, so this whole system has been a very big deal for her. At the moment, she's only allowed to be in there for 5 hours a week due to the trial run, but once she passes over, she will be in there permanently. Kelly then inquires about their engagement, and Greg says that the state has a lockdown on euthanasia to stop people if they like San Junipero more than real life. And since Yorkie's family won't sign for it, getting married and having a spouse say the word is her only shot. Both ceremonies, the wedding and the, sort of funeral, are scheduled to take place tomorrow. Kelly asks him if he can hook them up to the system one last time before she passes. He reluctantly agrees and hooks them up, telling Kelly that they have 5 minutes. We're back out on the beaches of San Junipero. Kelly runs up to Yorkie and confirms everything Greg had told her. Kelly offers to marry her instead, so it at least has some meaning. Yorkie excitedly agrees, and we're back out to the hospital room. Kelly signs some forms, they get married, and they pull the plug. Kelly then pulls up in a wedding gown and pokes at Yorkie for not dressing up. She looks down, and a dress instantly appears on her. Yorkie is dancing around in the sand, exclaiming how happy she is to live permanently here now, and asks Kelly to join her. Kelly says that she's already made up her mind of not passing over, and they begin to get into an argument. Yorkie says that there's no downside and that she can end it with the snap of her fingers whenever she wants to, and tells Kelly that her husband was actually pretty selfish for leaving her. Kelly then slaps Yorkie across the face. She explains how they were married for nearly 50 years, and that they had had a daughter who died when she was only 39. With her daughter never having the chance to go to San Junipero, Kelly's husband couldn't do it in good conscience, and how could Kelly as well? Yorkie then apologizes, but Kelly storms off. She hops in her Jeep and starts driving as fast as she can, the tins strung to the bumper flailing around. It's 2 minutes till midnight, and she drives towards a barricade in the road. She crashes into it and sails through the window, rolling on the ground. She lies there for a moment, with not a scratch on her body, and looks up to see Yorkie with her arms out to lift her up. Midnight strikes, and she pops out of existence. Kelly and her assistant are sitting on a bench, and she says that she's ready. Her assistant asks what for, and Kelly replies, quote, "for the rest of it." Back again in San Junipero, Yorkie happily hops into a car, music's playing, and she's driving down the road. Intermittently, shots cut in of Kelly passing away and being lowered into the ground. Yorkie pulls up to a house, and Kelly comes around the corner. The two of them then happily spend the rest of eternity with each other, as well as the millions of other consciousnesses stored in the database of San Junipero. Yay. Alright, I guess I spoke too soon about my reviews getting stale. I'm going to be completely honest, I did not like this episode at all. The concept is kind of cool, and the ending was okay, but romance stories just do not grip me. There's also this huge plot hole where she's talking about Greg as if she loves him as a spouse, and he's literally just a nurse who is getting married on paper to her so that she can legally pull the plug. It's also implied that the events of this whole episode are the first times that she's ever been in San Junipero, and if that's the case, she does not act at all like someone who spent the last 40 years in a bedridden state. Maybe I'm wrong about that, though, I don't know. Concept, 3 out of 5. Execution, 1 out of 5. Ending, 2 out of 5. giving San Junipero a total of 6 points. Season 3, Episode 5, Men Against Fire. A soldier dreams about life back home with his beautiful wife. He's awakened by a fellow comrade. The sergeant briefs all of them on a series of break-ins and thefts in a village near them. She says that the locals think it was the Roaches. Soldiers hop into a truck, all equipped with Fortnite scars, and we learn the names of a couple of the squad mates. The black guy who was dreaming before is known as Stripe. The blonde girl who'd woken him up is named Raymond, or Ray. They get to the village and their sergeant communicates with the locals using a handy-dandy translator device. One man says that he heard the Roaches making a mess and that they'd stolen food and supplies. He says the remaining food has to be destroyed since no one will eat it due to contamination. The sergeant assures him that they will replace the supplies, and while she gets more information on where the Roach is headed, Stripe is stopped by a woman holding a child. In English, she firmly asks him to stop them from coming. Stripe promises that he will. He's called back over to round up, and they head out to a compound where the Roaches are supposedly hiding. A man named Heidecker pops up on Stripe's hut and is described as a religious zealot with mental health issues. He's supposedly been sanctioning the Roaches, allowing them to pass and leaving food for them. These claims aren't founded on any evidential basis, though, so they're going to investigate. Another soldier talks about how millions of Roaches invaded back home, but now after 2 years of getting shit back on track, there must only be a couple of thousand left out here. A drone flies over the compound and surveys it. After seeing smoke coming out of the chimney, they know someone's home. One guy launches a noob tube toward the house, sticks to the wall, and scans the layout of the whole building. They make a plan and push towards the house with the orders of no shots fired, except on Roaches. Sarge knocks on the door and a man opens it slightly ajar. She asks him if they can come inside. He reluctantly agrees. Stripe and Ray split off and head upstairs to clear the rooms while Sarge and Heidecker sit down for a little chat. She asks him where the Roaches are and explains what happened to the nearby village. He denies any involvement as she points out the cross hanging on his wall. She says he must think all life is sacred, how that's a noble value, and tells him that she agrees. It's not the Roaches' fault that they are how they are, and it's just the shit in their blood. She says the sickness they are carrying doesn't care about the sanctity of life, and therefore they must stop the Roaches before humanity is forever doomed. Heidecker secretly pulls out a knife from his sleeve and toys with it in his hand. At first it seemed like the Roaches were some kind of an alien or parasitic monster, but now we infer they are people with an infectious and transforming disease. Ray opens up a closet and feels a hidden wall in the back. She kicks open the passage, and she and Stripe head down. Stripe spots a suspicious tarp hanging in the corner of a room. He moves towards it with his gun drawn and yanks it down. 3 pale humanoid ghouls screech at him through their jagged teeth. One of them pulls out a device with 3 green lights and points it in Stripe's direction. A high-pitched whistle rings through his ears. He raises his gun and he shoots the Roach. The others shriek, and the soldiers downstairs turn towards the sound of his gunshot. Heidecker takes the opportunity to slash the sergeant with his knife, and she quickly turns around and apprehends him. A female Roach knocks Stripe over with a chair and begins to flee, and he's tackled by a third. Stripe is pinned to the ground, and the device from before is being thrust towards his face again. He knocks the Roach off of him and pulls out his knife. He throws the Roach to the ground and slowly plunges the knife into its chest. The Roach struggles for a moment and then dies. Stripe pulls the knife out, looks down at him, and then proceeds to repeatedly stab the corpse again and again. He heads downstairs and meets back up with the other soldiers, who have Heidecker tied to a chair while he mutters a prayer in a foreign language. Stripe then hears the high-pitched ringing again. He winces and shakes it off, and the soldiers leave the compound with Heidecker, torching the building behind him. Ray congratulates him on getting the 2 Roaches on his first expedition out, and they head back to base. They're training on a range, and Stripe's HUD starts to wig out, making him miss his shot. Sarge notices how off he's acting and orders him to report to the sickbay. Stripe tells the doctor about the weird device with the lights that the Roaches had. The doctor brushes it off and runs some diagnostics on his implants. Everything checks out, and he advises Stripe to go see a man named Arquette. He enters his office and Arquette asks him to describe the encounters. He starts to tell him and gets to the part where he stabbed the Roach, referring to it as a he. Arquette takes note of this, giving him a look. Stripe corrects himself, dehumanizing the Roach as an it, and continues. Stripe is then asked how it felt during the encounter, emotionally. He says that he doesn't really know since it was kind of a self-defense thing, but that he doesn't feel any kind of regret or anything. Arquette tells him he should be proud of himself, and dismisses him, pressing a few buttons on his computer telling Stripe he's going to get a good sleep. It seems like they control the soldiers' dreams in some sense, maybe to help keep morale up while they're away from home. I definitely can't show anything that goes on, but I'll try and describe what happens here in the dream in the most family-friendly manner that I can. Stripe's wife is laying on a bed. She's wearing a suit one might wear on their birthday. He advances towards her and they begin to wrestle. I think he's winning, and then a hand covers his face. There's now two of his wife for him to handle wrestling with. His body twitches in the real world and he starts to glitch out. Even more duplicates of his wife surround him as they wrestle. Stripe suddenly wakes up and looks around at all the other soldiers. They're all laying with their fingers twitching as well. The next day, they head to another compound where roaches are supposedly hiding. It's filled with tall apartment buildings with hundreds of windows. Stripe feels the grass and picks it up, noting how they usually can't smell anything. Sarge stands up and tells everyone that the orders are to fall back, and suddenly she's shot in the head. Multiple shots ricochet off the cars they're using as cover, and Ray pulls out a drone to get some info while Stripe suppresses fire towards the buildings. The drone sees an open window with a roach inside, standing with a rifle. The roach shoots at it and takes out the drone. Ray notes how the rifle was old and says that they have a bit of time to move in before the roach has a chance to reload. They rush towards the building. They get inside and find a room littered with electronic parts, batteries, and designs. We see a thing that looks like the prototype of the device with the green LEDs, and the two of them head upstairs. As Stripe is clearing one of the rooms, he hears a creak behind him and turns to see a woman with a bat. She's screaming and swinging it around while he tells her to calm down. He tells her that it's not safe here due to the roaches and to evacuate. She heads out to the hallway and is immediately shot. Ray pops around the door and gives Stripe a look, advancing down the hallway. He looks down at the body and tries to confront her about shooting a human. She ignores him and moves on. She makes her way up the stairs and shoots a hole in the door. She peers through and hears the grunting of roaches. She kicks open the door and multiple roaches begin to roar and run around. She guns them all down, and when we cut away from her perspective, we see that they are also humans. Stripe catches up to her as she massacres everyone and spots a woman and child narrowly escaping the gunfire. He looks into the woman's pleading eyes for a moment, and Ray enters the room in order to execute them. Seeing as she needs to reload, Stripe gets up and knocks the rifle away, telling the woman and child to run. Ray fights back as Stripe knocks her to the ground, telling her she's killing them. Ray says they're just roaches and knocks them off. Stripe takes the butt of his gun and bashes her face with it. She fires off a shot as she collapses and strikes him in the side. He gets up, holding the wound, and urgently tells the woman and child, still cowering behind the couch, to follow him. They hop in a truck and drive off onto a trail. He passes out and the woman drags him into a hidden bunker. She treats his wound, and when he wakes up, she asks him if he sees her as she is, not as a roach. He says no, because she's not a roach. She confirms that the army uses the implants in the HUD to alter their senses and to help them fight and not feel remorse or the effects of warfare. She says that one of the roaches was building a machine and describes the device with the green lights. She says that it can interfere with the implant, and that answers why he's been glitching out and seeing reality for what it is. Ray has been slowly tracking them and makes her way to the abandoned truck, feeling the hood to see if it's warm. Stripe asks the woman what the locals see when they look at them, and she says what he sees now. They've been told to hate the roaches, saying 10 years ago their people began to be rejected by every system in place, and soon everyone called them nothing but filthy creatures. Every voice, TV, and computer broadcasting that they are filled with a deadly sickness must be exterminated like a futuristic holocaust. She introduces herself as Katrina, her son is Alec, and grabs his hand, glad he can actually see her. Suddenly, Ray drops into the bunker. Alex starts to run, and Stripe screams as she raises her gun and executes both of them. She walks over to Stripe and puts her gun to his head. He softly tells her that none of it's true. She spits on the ground, says a quick "fuck you," and then bashes his head with her rifle. We then cut to a white cell. Stripe is cowered in a corner. Arquette enters the room and begins to tell him about the device he'd found in the farmhouse. The green lights emit a sort of code that works its way through the implant and disrupts it like a virus. Stripe just repeats again and again that the whole thing is a lie, and Arquette says he understands why he'd say that. Arquette says roaches are so dangerous because they look just like he and Stripe, saying that humans at their core don't really want to kill each other. He says that in the First World Wars, only 15% of soldiers would actually pull the trigger. He describes how their implant is the ultimate military weapon. Stripe reiterates that the roaches are human beings, and Arquette then spews off a bunch of statistics as to why he and the people in power believe that roaches are inferior, including higher rates of cancer, substandard IQ, and sexual deviances. It's unknown if these are actually true or not, but it doesn't matter regardless. Arquette believes that they need to be exterminated. He shows Stripe a video of himself accepting and agreeing to the terms of service in the military. Stripe says he doesn't remember this, and angrily tells him to turn it off. He then lunges at Arquette, who dodges him, clicks a button, and Stripe slams into a wall. He tells him that they control what they see, and he will give him his eyes back when he makes a choice. He can either have his memory of the last few days wiped, forgetting everything he's learned about the reality of their situation, or he can be incarcerated. To help him make his decision, he replays the scene of the farmhouse. It plays out just like it did before, only this time, when he yanks the curtain away, we see people begging for their lives as he shoots him. We see the man he killed with the knife, groaning as the knife was plunged into his chest, with Stripe stabbing him again and again. Stripe shouts at what he's done, and Arquette says he will see and smell and feel it all, locked in a cell, looping for as long as he lives. He tells whimpering Stripe that he can make it all go away, and he just has to say the word. Stripe ponders for a moment, and a tear rolls down his nose. We cut to him, dressed up inside of a car. They pull up to an abandoned neighborhood. He steps out of the car and looks at his house. From his point of view, it's bright and sunny out. The house is clean with bushes full of flowers and a welcome home sign out front. We can see that in reality it's disheveled, windows are broken, and there's graffiti all over. Stripe's fictional wife steps out onto the porch and walks up to him, with joyful tears rolling down his face. And we end the episode with Stripe standing alone on the desolate street. Whew! Yet another one of the episodes that I remember really getting me the first time. The concept is so gripping because it fully realizes what militaries have tried to do in the past with dehumanizing the enemy. Imagine if they had this technology back in the 50s and 60s. This is exactly the type of shit that the CIA would have been experimenting with. One thing that really took me out, though, were these super goofy futuristic sounds that they added on top of the gunshots. It would have kept me invested so much more just being regular guns, but they straight up sound like a plasma rifle from Halo. Other than that, as well as your typical Hollywood misunderstanding of how guns work in some scenes, this was a fantastic episode. Concept, 5 out of 5. Execution, 4 out of 5. Ending, 4 out of 5. Giving Men Against Fire a total of 13 points. Season 3, Episode 6, Hated in the Nation. A woman is testifying in a courtroom. They ask her to recall the events of last May. She says she first got involved on the 15th, and we cut to a flashback of the events, with a lower third saying, Day 1. She arrives at home, gets a thing of Pringles out, and sits down to watch some TV. A news channel is talking about the death of someone nicknamed the Wheelchair Martyr. A newspaper columnist named Joe Powers has written an article degrading the esteemed individual, and a petition was made to have her fired, with 20,000 signatures so far. We see Jo walking along the streets with a smug look on her face, everyone she passes by glaring at her, and some insulting her. We then learn that honeybees have gone all but extinct, and a company has produced hundreds of thousands of small robotic drone bees to mimic their role in the environment, called ADIs, or artificial drone insects. Jo makes it home and a man from a bakery delivers her a cake. She jokingly asks if it's going to explode, and accepts it. She brings over a knife and immediately cuts a slice out of it, the cake reading, quote, fucking bitch. She takes a bite out of the cake and grabs a bottle of wine. Her husband heads upstairs to take a bath. She laughs and revels in the hatred spread her way online, scrolling through comment after comment with people berating her, with some people even saying hashtag death to Joe Powers. The camera pans behind her to show that the window is slightly open, and we cut back to the woman on a couch. She's now watching a talk show with a dancer known as Tusk. For a segment, they show a 9-year-old kid who's emulating him, who's also waiting backstage. Tusk then proceeds to insult the kid, saying how goofy he looks and is a terrible dancer. He's literally cursing at him and saying that he should give up now. As funny as it is, it's clear that reciprocal hatred and insults are very normalized online and in the media. The woman gets a message on her phone and then drives to a crime scene. She steps out of her car and a woman with blonde hair introduces herself as Blue Coulson, saying that she's her shadow. She responds with her name, Detective Karen Park, and the two of them head inside the scene. A man named Nick fills them in on what's going on. Joe Powers is dead. Inside the house, blood is splattered on the walls. Joe's body is on the floor with her throat slashed. Nick says the neighbors called once they heard her screaming, and Karen points towards things knocked around on the ground, indicating a struggle. We also learn that the husband was found slashed across the stomach, but he's been taken to the hospital and has a chance of recovery. Karen walks over to the window, noting how it's closed and bolted in place. Comments are still pouring through, and she notices the cake, saying to take it to toxicology for assessment. They walk out and discuss next steps, Karen saying the obvious person to check is her husband if and when he wakes up. She says an attack like this is almost always drink, drugs, or domestic, and then offers Blue a ride home. The next day, Karen arrives at the office. Blue and Nick are at a computer looking at CCTV footage of the home's security cameras. He says no one entered or left the house all night, and we can also see that the rear patio camera is disabled. Apparently it had been like this for months. Blue posits that someone could have come in through there, and Karen says it's unlikely since they would have had to know the camera was down and climbed over the fence. Blue walks back to her computer and searches internet traffic for people adding Joe, along with some nasty keywords. Karen interjects saying that it's a long shot since hate on the internet is not nearly as real and seated as something within like a household marriage. Nick comes over and says the husband is up and talking, and that they head over to the hospital. The husband says he heard her screaming from upstairs, and when he ran down he saw her stumbling around the room, clutching her head in pain. He says she dropped to the ground as if she was having a seizure, clawing and thrashing at her skin. He says she smashed her head on the desk and pushed him over, knocking the bottle of wine off the table. She grabbed the bottle and started cutting herself with it, gouging at her temple. A lot of bottles being broken and used as weapons in this show, huh? Anyways, he cries and says that he tried to stop her, but that's when she slashed him in the stomach and then cut her throat with the glass. Blue is convinced that he is telling the truth. Karen is still unconvinced. They then go to talk to the person who'd sent the cake, just in case the toxicology report has anything significant. They also pull up the person's social media feed, and sure enough, earlier that week, she'd posted #death to Joe Powers. The woman works as a school teacher, and she says that she split the cost of the cake with a bunch of people on a message board. Blue brings up the post she'd made about the hashtag, and the woman explains that it's just a trend online of posting that with a person you hate, saying it's just a meme and a joke. Blue asks who started it, and she says she doesn't know, she just saw it online at some point. Karen gets a chime on her phone and tells Blue that the toxicology report for the cake came back clean, so they head out. Back at the office, Nick brings up how Tusk is now the target of the internet hate storm due to the stuff he'd said on the talk show. People using the Death2 hashtag on him as well. We see Tusk down in a parking garage smoking that Zaza as some workers pack up his stuff after a show. He suddenly grips his head screaming. The guy he's with calls for help and lays him on the ground. He writhes around in an ambulance, and the paramedics sedate him. An x-ray shows a patch or a hole near the back of his brain, and they put him into an MRI for a better analysis. They turn it on, and suddenly he starts to convulse. They shut it off, and the screen shows a streak going from his brain to his eye. The operatives pull him out, and his face is streaked in blood, a hole protruding out of his left eye socket. They reach inside the machine and find an ADI, tattered wings and crushed in half. Wong from Doctor Strange has apparently made a drastic career change as an agent for the National Crime Agency, and comes into the building to inspect the body. Blue and Karen are also looking at a body. The autopsy report on Joe is about complete, and the coroner has found something interesting. There's a small tunnel going from her ear canal deep into her brain, and he shows them what he found. It's another ADI, this one intact. Karen asks how it got in there, and he says it probably burrowed in. And not only that, it crawled through the dorsal posterior insula, which is essentially the brain's pain center. He says that she would have done anything to make agony like that stop. Even cut your own throat, Karen finishes. They head over to the Granular Project headquarters where the bees are monitored and controlled. A woman takes them to meet Rasmus, the head of the swarm department. He explains that the bees are solar powered and independently control themselves to pollinate flowers and other plant life. They navigate using a primitive visual sensor and even build hives that act as a 3D printer to reproduce in a way. They question him about the ones that cause the deaths, and he explains that most malfunctions usually just result in the bee crashing into a wall and breaking. He tries to explain how, in order to hack the bees, one would need to work through multiple layers of military-grade encryption, but Karen cuts him off, clarifying that it's not impossible. He takes them to a monitoring room and shows a live feed of all the hives and bees active in the city. Blue types in Joe's address and asks him if any bees went offline around Monday evening, the night she died. He checks it out, and sure enough, one went out that night, knowing how it didn't reconnect to any of the other hives. Blue theorizes that someone might have spoofed a hive and used it to commandeer the bee. He says that you'd need a diagnostic controller in order to do that, which has a range of only about 20 meters. He tries to trace down who did this, and then suddenly gets up and says it would be easier if they could leave him to it without an audience. They suspiciously agree and then get his contact information. Karen asks if they could hypothetically shut the whole system down in a worst-case scenario, and the answer is yes, but it would be very damaging to the ecosystem and would need approval from the government. Back at the station, Wong introduces himself to the detectives, saying his real name is Sean Lee. Karen questions why he is here, and he holds up a case with the bee from Tusk's head, saying there's been more than one. He shows them a video of what happened in the parking garage, and Karen says this rules out any kind of a malfunction, and points out the similarity between the two victims, that being both were in the middle of a huge controversy online. Sean points out there's millions of other ways to kill people that would be way easier. Karen retorts saying that there'd be no DNA or fingerprints, and it's basically like wishing them dead. This gives Blue a little light bulb moment. She heads over to her computer to pull up the trend with the hashtag. They traced the first use of the hashtag to a bot account, posting it just days before the incident started occurring. It has ADI in the name, and the profile picture is of a bee. It was posting the hashtag multiple times with a link to a video explaining rules to a game. If enough people use the hashtag on any given person by 5 p.m., then they will be marked as a target and killed by the end of the day. Blue pulls up the analytics showing the use of the hashtag, and it is getting exponentially more popular, with today about 900 people marking a woman named Clara Meads, who had posted a picture of her pretending to piss on a war memorial. Since Tusk isn't public knowledge yet, the people using the hashtag have no idea that they are actually sentencing someone to death. But they are regardless, so they head out to get Clara in protective custody. She's at home distraughtly looking through the hateful comments and receives a call from Karen. She tells Clara that she may be in danger, to stay where she is until they get there, and to keep the windows closed. Rasmus, back at the monitoring room, has also marked the house so that any bees that try to enter will inform them if anyone is attempting to breach. Clara watches out her window as dozens of armed officers surround the building. Karen and the gang arrive and take her to a secluded safe house. Little do they know, a lone bee has tagged along for the ride. It buzzes around the windows outside as they take her upstairs. Blue suddenly gets a call from Rasmus saying a whole hive of bees has gone rogue, thousands of them, close to their location. Their connection then fails, and the phone disconnects. Rasmus watches as the entire map turns from yellow to blue and says that they don't have control of them anymore. Sean watches as a giant swarm of bees rapidly fly toward the house, and Blue receives a text from Rasmus telling him to get out now. She runs to get the others so they can leave, but the bees are already inside. They all run inside the upstairs bathroom, and Karen yanks down the shower curtain to plug the crack under the door. Thousands of bees start to pour in through the mail slot like letters from Hogwarts and smash through the glass of the upstairs windows. They chaotically buzz and spiral around looking for an entrance into the bathroom. The door rattles and one finds its way into the keyhole. Karen luckily spots this and quickly covers it with her hand before the bee can get in. Unfortunately for them, though, one other has already made its way through the fan in the room, buzzing around on the ceiling. It lands on the light switch and Karen swats it away. A few more bees find their way in and begin to dive down towards Clara before Blue gets a chance to shut the fan. Clara shakes around on the ground as Karen covers her ears, with Blue swatting away any that come near. A bee manages to dodge all of this, lands on her face, and crawls into her nostril. She screams and claws at her head as her nose starts to bleed, with Karen and Blue watching in horror as she froths in a mouth. Clara squirms for a moment, and then ceases. Having completed their mission, the bees immediately return to their idle state. Karen and Blue hold her body as they catch their breath. We're then taken back to the courtroom from the beginning of the episode. Karen says that in all her time spent as a detective, she's seen bodies in autopsies and crime scenes, but never had watched anyone die before. We go back to the future, where Karen, Rasmus, Blue, and Sean are discussing how this could have happened. Their initial theory was that a person was manually piloting one bee, but there were thousands of them, so they must have control over the entire system. Blue then questions, how do the bees know who to target? She says it must know directly who to target because both her and Karen were in the room with Clara, and neither of them were attacked. She puts together that the bees must have some sort of facial recognition. Rasmus explains that the visual feed is secure between each ADI and its hive, and begins to say, though, that the government did have a special requirement for backing their project. Sean tries to tell him to stop talking, but he continues regardless. He says that they had to permit the government access to the visual feeds of every bee in order to, quote, increase national security. They start to argue with Sean about this, him defending that they've prevented bombings and shootings by spying on the public, as Blue states. She blames him for withholding that information and that it could have helped save Clara. Karen cuts them off, saying they need to focus on stopping this before another person is killed. Blue and Rasmus go to look through the onboard cache of one of the recovered bees, and Karen goes to interview some potential suspects who work at the company. News is now public that 3 deaths have occurred due to people using the hashtag. Some people protest the use online, and some continue to do it anyways. Karen is briefed on her next interview with a woman named Tess Wallander. She'd worked in human resources up until she quit. Tess had posted a photo of a man at work saying that he had harassed her, and when it came out that the man had a disability, she was viciously berated online. Tess describes how it felt to be on the receiving end of all of that, comparing it to a mental illness. It got so bad that she tried to end her own life, but her roommate, Garrett, found her just after her attempt and managed to get her help in time to save her. She mentions that he had a bit of a thing for her and also worked at Granular on the ADI project. Karen takes special note of this. She comes back to tell the others, and they've found Garrett's name as well, in the onboard memory on Joe's ADI. Their new prime suspect has left a 100-page manifesto. Karen reads a random excerpt. He's furious at the allowance of anonymous ridicule online, void of accountability or consequence. He compares the population to insects, saying that we revel in cruelty. All in all, he wants people to be accountable for what they act out. Nick makes a post online, hashtag death to Garrett Scholes, along with a picture from the manifesto. He hesitates to post it for a moment, and then sends it through. Blue was able to image search the selfie and finds the original upload, which just so happened to include a geotag in the metadata, pinpointing exactly to where he at least might be. We cut to Garrett's point of view. He hears a chime on his tablets and opens it to see Nick's post with his name on it. He nervously looks around and police pull up to his house, preparing to raid it. They smash open the window and clear every room, but unfortunately, it's a bust. They scour through every room and find virtually nothing of importance. Blue is then checking through a furnace filled with burnt trash and picks up a scorched hard drive. She's very confident that she can restore at least some of what's on it. The hard drive is filled with Garrett's source code that he used to hack into granular systems, and Rasmus is confident that he can quickly reverse engineer it to get control back. He's preparing to deactivate the bees, but spots a file in the system that wasn't there before. Blue checks it out, and it's a list with nearly 400,000 strings of numbers. She thinks they are IMEI numbers for phones, tablets, or computers. Sure enough, every number is tied to a unique user registered with social media. Sean impatiently tries to rush Rasmus to get it ready to deactivate, and Blue looks up the name of the teacher that had sent the cake and posted the hashtag. Sure enough, she's on the list, and so is every single individual that had used hashtag death to. Nick asks if he's on there since he tried to make that post earlier to get a reaction from Garrett, and he is as well. Karen tries to figure out why he's been collecting all of this data, and Rasmus says it's ready to be deactivated. Sean tells him to run it, but Karen tells him to hold off for a moment, pointing out how they had been left a trail. The photo with the geotag is too big of a mistake for someone of Garrett's caliber. She's worried that deactivating the system will trigger some kind of endgame event, and realizes the 400,000 people on that list, those are the real targets. Everyone who took part in the anonymous hate game finally getting the consequences he thinks they so rightly deserve. Sean tells him again to deactivate it. Rasmus protests so they can think, but Sean leaves over and presses a key to send the command. They look up to the live map and watch as it fills back to being yellow, with control now in their hands. A sigh of relief washes over them, and suddenly one of the hives turns red. Then another, and another. A sea of red takes over every hive and bee, with incessant beeping in the background. Swarms of bees fly out from their hives and split off towards their many targets. A student of the school teacher worriedly points to the window behind her, which is rattling away with the tip-taps of bees landing on the glass. Nick turns to see the same thing, and the others stand and watch, knowing what's about to happen. Garrett, having completed his mission, packs up his things, shaves his beard and his head, and places a fake contact lens in to mask his identity. He leaves a hut in a foreign country and walks out onto a dam. He fills his bag of clothes with rocks and chucks it into the river. Karen and Blue walk out into a warehouse that's filled with thousands of bodies, just a fraction of the total casualties that day. Back at the courtroom, Karen is asked what happened to Blue after the events. She says that she felt somewhat responsible for what had occurred, and the working theory was that she had taken her own life, with the only thing left of her being clothes and a note found at a beach. We see Garrett at a bar watching the courtroom broadcast. He pays for his drink and leaves the bar. Blue is still alive, following right behind him. Karen gets a text from her, simply reading, "Got him," smirks, and then deletes the message. Now, at the beginning of this series, I said that 15 Million Merits was my favorite episode in the whole show. And while I still love that one to this day, I can't believe I forgot how amazing this episode is. The setup is so interesting at first while being so tame in comparison to what happens overall. The breadcrumbs slowly leading to Garrett's true goal, the visceral images of the bees crawling through people's ears and noses. I can't even imagine what that felt like to the 400,000 people who had endured this. I think it's been one of, if not the only one so far, that had scenes that were legitimately hard to watch. I tried to find complaints to make, and I really just couldn't think of anything. As of right now, Hated in the Nation takes the spot for my favorite episode in the entire series. Concept 5 out of 5, execution 5 out of 5, ending 5 out of 5 with a total of 15 points. Overall, Season 3 contains some of the best and some of the worst that this show has to offer. Nearly every episode, though, was really good. And as always, we'll list each episode in order of lowest to highest. San Junipero, 6 points. Men Against Fire, 13 points. Playtest, 14 points. Nosedive, 15 points.
Shut Up and Dance, 15 points.
And Hated in the Nation, 15 points. I will say I feel a bit weird giving most of these such low disparity in their rankings, but I promise I really, really like this season. And if my memory serves me correctly, there will be much more disparity in the upcoming seasons. I also plan on making a shorter video after this one comes out to go over some of the comments, criticisms, and even things that I missed from the first few seasons, so stay tuned for that. As always, these are such a blast to make, and I'm so happy with the reception that this series has gotten. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for Season 4. Peace.